far as I knew, as much as dams were, but he's going to get on the call and maybe he'll try and articulate something. I don't know.
Okay, we're just about to go live on YouTube. And I'm going to get back.
That's a first, right?
Yeah. And then I'm back in the room. Got
What does
it.
that mean?
And we're going to admit everybody now. Are we pretty much ready to let people admit and then?
Yeah, well, then we wait a few minutes still. It's about 6:57 on my
Okay. Computer. Maybe there's time to say hi to everyone too. That you recognize. Here they come.
I can have Allie do some dog tricks, right?
I'm going to keep muting everyone just to minimize audio for now. So when you have to speak, you'll know that you may have been muted unbeknownst to you.
Hey, everybody, we'll be gathering here for a few minutes and then we'll get going about 7 or a minute or so after. So hang in there. Thank you.
If you've just joined us, we'll be starting in a couple minutes. Thank you for waiting. Ed, is your record good?
I did hit record, so I'm not seeing any.
All right, so we should be good to go. Yep, I see your recording as well, Ed. It's showing up on the participants section.
Yep.
Thank you.
I saw that my option was to pause recording, so I guess I am. So I think we're probably ready to roll, right? A couple of minutes after 7, I think.
Yep, you're on.
Right. So thanks. So, hey, welcome everybody. I'm Ed Friedman, Chairman of Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. Hopefully some of you are here for the first time, and I'm sure a lot of you are here as per usual. I don't have everyone up on my screen, so I can't even tell right now. So we are recording the presentation. So keep that in mind. If you don't want to be recorded, have your face or your voice or however you end up in being involved. This would be a good time to leave. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about Friends of Merry Meeting Bay before introducing our speaker. I do want to thank Martha Spees, and I don't know if Arthur's behind the scenes tonight as well, but if he is, thank him as well. And Martha and Arthur will be fielding questions, which you can put along the way into the chat box or chat room, whatever it is, and Martha will kind of field those at the end. So feel free to do that. Also thank Martin McDonough, one of our web volunteers who sort of deals with this part of the web. And of course, our speaker. So, whoops. There. So, yeah, we're a unique organization. Friends of Merry Meeting Bay, unique in that we are very holistic in terms of what we do and how we approach the environment. So we do research, we do advocacy work. We're a land trust, so we protect and conserve land, and we have an active education program. And I'll just run through a few slides here with a few examples of some things that we've done over the years and or are doing. You know, we did a multi-year current study or circulation study on the bay, GPS units in these floaters, monitoring every 30 seconds where they are. It's all on the website, animated flows, pretty cool to look at. Worked on invasive species, still do a little bit of that. Use caged freshwater mussels for biomonitoring and to see whether mills were still discharging dioxin or not once they changed their protocols. Have an active water quality monitoring program that's been useful in upgrading the rivers. And we still do eagle surveys and do archaeology when we have a chance. Strong advocacy organization, a lot of around fish passage issues. This is an eel that was killed trying to out-migrate after being up on the Sebastopol River, maybe 30 years or somewhere between 30 and 50 years. Killed going off to spawn once in her life in the Sargasso Sea. Don't have to be a big eel to have that happen. It can also be just a little alewife or blueback herring. Worked on toxics issues over the years as well, and kind of re-engaging now with some of the PFAS or forever chemical issues coming out of the old air base and other areas, municipal solid wastewater plants into the bay. Education has been hit hardest by COVID, but we're still getting some targeted opportunities to get into schools and work with kids. Last year, a couple of great presentations outside of schools, warm October days, and planning to do that again this year. And of course, the speaker series is part of our education program as well. Protected well over 1,500 acres of land by now. Mostly our focus is on prime wildlife habitat as opposed to trails and so forth. And we've got 3 conservation easements in the works. If you missed the program tonight, or you've got someone, a friend who missed the program, or you want to go back and look at it, on our homepage down on the right under the education section, got a speaker series video list thing here, and you can click on that and you'll find a link to this in a couple of days or so. And here's our series for the year. This is our 25th year doing this. It's pretty incredible. Great speakers. And if all goes well, surgery allowing, or surgery postponed, the March speaker is going to be really awesome. Mark Beckoff, he's a very, very well-known evolutionary biologist and ethologist. He's worked with Jane Goodall and the likes of her on animal behavior. So hopefully that'll work out well. And there, and we can go over to Steve's face now on the screen while I introduce him. Martha, if you want to do that. And so, yeah, so Steve Heinz, happy to have him with us tonight. He's figuring out how to get his slides up to do the, let's see there, the current, looks, there we go. So Steve earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and he had a Navy commission from the University of Louisville, 1970, through the NROTC program. He was a naval flight officer for his career with the Navy. And he's been here after being stationed in Brunswick since 1988. first became seriously involved in conservation, doing volunteer work for Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, MDIF&W. Stream survey of Martin Stream and Turner. I have no idea where that is, Steve. In 2005, he got involved then with Trout Unlimited and spearheaded a lot of their volunteer efforts in Sebago chapter, looking at survey work and fish passage issues, culminating with a couple of dam removals. So that's fantastic. Those were back in July of 2013. Steve's worked with the Wells National Estuary and Reserve program to remove a third dam in Arundel, 2015, and worked with Fish and Wildlife Service and a number of other groups and nonprofits, brought in a lot of grant money to the tune of $500,000 or so for about 5 habitat restoration projects. So Steve's been awarded by IF&W for his efforts. Chapters won a Gold Trout Award for having the greatest success in conservation projects, protect and restore habitat in their area. And he continues to be active with TU on the Maine Council as their FERC action coordinator, FERC being the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And he's also working with the Royal River Alliance, and he's been helpful with our efforts to upgrade the lower Androscoggin water quality. So Steve lives with his wife, Kathy, in Cumberland Foreside. Been married 50 years, and we're really happy to have you here tonight, Steve. Even though you disappeared, people were supposed to see your mug while we were waiting, but you can explain the schematic and take it from here. Thank you.
Well, anyway, thanks very much for the introduction, Ed, and thanks even more for giving me the opportunity to talk to the group this evening. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer, though. Just wanted everyone to know that really the purpose of the briefing is informational, and please don't construe anything as statements of TU policy. If I state opinions, they are my own opinions and just that. So something smacks of opinion, it's Steve's and not necessarily TU's. So anyway, it's important that we talk about the Androscoggin. Besides being one of the two major rivers that feeds Mary Meeting Bay, which is I guess the focus of the group. It's Maine's third largest river. It's really, a major watershed here in the state. And I'll let you read the slide here for a minute to give you some metrics. And what I think everyone should recognize too is that the part of the watershed does extend into New Hampshire. Then when you get into the northern part up in this area, it crosses back over into Maine in the Rangeley area. What we're going to be talking about today and what we're really going to be calling the lower river for purposes of this presentation is really just going to be the lowest part below Lewiston Falls, but then also we're going to be talking a fair amount about the Little Androscoggin, which goes a fair distance on upstate. And when we talk restoration, the starting point needs to be what was there originally. What was it before in the pre-Columbian era, what was there before we came? And we know there were Atlantic salmon all the way up to Rumford Falls, and even in the Little Androscoggin up to Snow Falls, and in the Little River. We know there were river herring all the way in the Androscoggin up to Lewiston Falls, and that was pretty much as far as they could go. The Little Andro up to Biscoe Falls, and the Sabattis River into Sabattis Pond. We could be talking about a number of other species, and they're certainly important, I guess, especially American eels, because they're pretty much ubiquitous in the state. Whether, even with dams without fish passage, American eels, a few of them, some of them still manage to get upstream and populate area, but certainly at a reduced rate. But for purposes of this talk, we're going to be concentrating on Atlantic salmon and river herring. And for most of these fish, significant runs of fish were eliminated by the 1850s. Dams without effective fishways, really, it's a terrible thing. So I guess, what it comes down to is if you're going to pick one thing that was preventing us from restoring our fisheries in the state, it would be the presence of main stem dams throughout the state. This is no longer up on the NOAA fisheries site, but what it said up till last year was we've seen notable victories. I mean, I think everybody by now knows that Edwards Dam and the dams on the Penobscot were really the exception and not the rule. And we still have 90% of dams blocking approximately 90% of the habitat where we used to have Atlantic salmon spawning and rearing habitat. And that's, there's steady progress. Hopefully every, year we do a little better, but as of about a year ago, that's pretty much where this stood. So, besides Atlantic salmon, we'll be, we can be talking about classifications of fish. And I kind of feel like I have to throw this slide in there because it's so confusing. We talk about diadrous fish, and that's fish that go between freshwater and in the ocean at least once. They can be of two types, either anadromous fish of the ones that we list there, or catadromous fish, which are really just American eels and really pretty special kind of creature. Also, just something to consider are potanadramus fish and brook trout, white suckers. These are abundant throughout the state, and they need to move in fresh water to access critical habitat. It's not the great run from the sea that we see with Atlantic salmon or alewives or these kinds of fish, but certainly they have to get around to get to different kinds of habitat. So what kind of habitat? Spawning habitat, salmonids, trout, salmon. They need gravels. They need some wet water coming up under the gravels, so there's upwelling, so the eggs can be surrounded and oxygenated. They need nursery. They need habitat where there's rocks in places for them to hide from the larger fish that predate on them. They need feeding habitat where the areas where there are appropriate aquatic and terrestrial insects. Refugia, places when it's warm, they can find oxygen and survive those kinds of conditions. And also winter holding, places generally deeper spots where they can live during the winter. We're going to be talking a lot about dams, and dams are relicensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission at about a 30 to 50 year interval. And unfortunately, they're not spaced out. There's no logical schedule or any rhyme or reason to when these relicensings occur. And really for about the last 5 years and for about the next 5 years, really the Northeast and especially Maine really has a lot of relicensings, and everyone is just scrambling to try to deal with all these adequately. I'm going to just kind of wait a second here and give you a minute to read this slide. I don't want to read this at you, but we'll be talking about most of these dams later in the project. And we're really just, it's on the slide. I didn't see to delete it, but just to let you know, just kind of outside the scope of this talk, Rumford Falls, that project in Rumford is also up for relicensing currently. So I'm going to give you a minute to read here. And I guess I'll just make one other comment. Is this the Markel project there in Mechanics Falls? It's Fish Passage is supposed to be subsequent to 2027, but it's triggered by DMR fisheries plan. And there's a draft plan that I'll refer to in the presentation, but not an approved plan at this time. But here are some of the documents that you can find on the internet. I'll also have some links that will lead you to them if you're interested in seeing really what this presentation is based on. The draft fisheries management plan is really a very easy to read document. In some ways, I like it better than the federal document. It is just a draft, but it's been prepared by some very competent people in DMR and IF&W. The NOAA Androscoggin River Watershed Comprehensive Plan for Diadrous Fish. It's a parallel federal document. It is an approved document, and that is also available. And just something that's come out recently that has a lot of good information in it if you want to dig and really know what's going on is this BIOP that was just issued a couple months ago. And this will be incorporated into licenses for Brunswick and Lewiston Falls. But when we talk about the lower Androscoggin, we're going to be talking about these three dams, the dams at Brunswick, Pajebscott, and up at Rumbo in Lewiston Falls. And all told, these three projects, they're medium-sized projects. I guess that total number listed, the 52,000 kilowatts, is about 2/3 of the generation capability of Wyman Dam alone. And you'll notice that all the little dots there are green, and that's because nominally these places all have provision for upstream fish passage. Problem is, none of it works very well. So we'll start by talking about Rumbo at Lewiston Falls. That one expires in 2025. It's early in the relicensing process. It's once again it's a medium-sized project. The operator is Eagle Creek Renewable. They're a large Canadian energy company, and the issue there is anadromous fish passage effectiveness. Kind of interesting, going through the relicensing, the operator kind of got FERC to not conduct some studies because they pretty much says, hey, look, we know we're going to have to change what's there as far as fish passage eventually. So, don't make us prove that it's not that good right now. We pretty much already know that. Moving downstream, the next thing is the Pajebscott project there in Topsom. Used to supply the mill, which has been burned, for 20 years now, I guess. This will be relicensed this year, most likely. The final license application has been submitted. Brookfield Renewable is the owner. They, haven't changed the name of the license, but it's really Brookfield, which is a huge Canadian company that has about $30 billion in assets. They own right now over 80% of the nameplate hydroelectric generation capability in the state of Maine. They've been in Maine about 10 years. As you probably may or may not know, they're suing the state over what's happening in their efforts to manage restoration of the Kennebunk. They're also appealing a verdict on the Ellsworth project by Maine DEP denying their water quality certification for that project. So I guess in most cases, what they tend to go into these relicensing with is offering very little, and any concessions that you get, any improvements over status quo are pretty much, have to be forced by matters of law. But anyway, just recently, DMR issued preliminary fish passage provisions, and if Brookfield doesn't fight these, then then they kind of are going to be stuck with them. What they do is they double fish passage targets, and it requires monitoring. I was kind of surprised when I saw this, but then, I think they are really going to, the agencies are going to be dealing with this. And once again, this is my opinion. The way the agencies appear to be dealing with this is what they want to happen is just monitoring of the effectiveness of the fish passage there to continue. And they're really going to reserve what the final disposition for this project is for, is improving fish passage until a future date. And I guess the next one going downstream is Brunswick. It expires in 2029, so we're just a few years before that's relicensing process is going to start up again. It's another medium-sized project owned by Brookfield entirely. Once again, it's an Diadrous fish passage effectiveness is certainly in question. A recent study showed there were problems with Shad Passage. And I'm going to let you read this slide. I think people recognize the picture there on the right. And go ahead, and I'm going to give you a minute to just read. And I guess over the years, and once again, this is a personal feeling and not a policy thing, but it's always amazed me how from time to time you'll see something in the Times. You used to see things in the Time Record where some group from overseas, a conservation group was shown the viewing room there and the alewives and all that. And I guess it makes a pretty picture, but really the fishway has never functioned as it was designed to function. As I understand it, it's really just a scaled down version of a West Coast design where they really didn't take into account the actual size of the fish as much as the size of the river, and it's never functioned effectively. So anyway, this biological opinion, it specifies some changes in the way the fishway will be operated. And they've when there are going to be people there to actually operate the trap to truck fish around, they've added a camera so they can see what's happening as far as fish and type of fish entering the fishway. And this should provide just some marginal improvement to how well the fishway functions. We expect that the real improvement is not going to be happening until 2029 when relicensing occurs. And we really think that this will drive additional changes upriver. I don't know the future, and this is once again an opinion on my part, but just I suspect that most of you are to some degree reading the paper and watching what's been happening with the Kennebec river dams. And what I think will happen is something is when Brunswick is relicensed, it'll be kind of the seminal event, kind of like the Shawmut relicensing has been for the lower Kennebec. And I think when that happens, we're going to see a whole series of things start to happen. And I would suspect that they will, instead of just have an environmental assessment for the Brunswick relicensing, what the agencies will want to do and will force will be an environmental impact statement, which will holistically look at the whole 3 dams and see what they can do. The thing is, this lower river, it's all critical Atlantic salmon habitat, and it is supposed to be treated specially, and it's going to drive some change. So that's those lower 3 dams. So we're going to go on upstream here a little bit and just kind of briefly touch on Lewiston Falls. This was the limit to river herring going upstream. Atlantic salmon were able to pass these falls and get all the way up to the base of Rumford Falls upstream. Fish passage above this, other than eels, which is being addressed in the Lewiston Falls relicensing, It's really nobody really has a good idea on how to fix this with the big mess with Gulf Island Pond and just the whole situation. No one has any good ideas that I've been able to determine on how to go forward with this. So really what happens upstream is not really addressed by these fishery management plans. The issues with the Lewiston Falls relicensings are going to be the scenic flows. They generally, since they did put in the Monty Station there to generate power using water that normally would have gone to the industrial canal and gone to Bates Mill and those kinds of places, they used to water the dam at a much greater interval than what it's watered. Water the falls at a much greater interval. We certainly would like to see the falls watered because of the both the scenic aspects of it, but also because of the oxygenation, and it does have some effect. That would have some effect on water quality. And I'm sure I'm not going to steal any of Ed's thunder and go into the issues with upgrading the water quality of the lower river from water quality classification C to B. But anyway, the BIOP did talk about flows from the project potentially causing problem downstream. I think that's a minor concern, but at least it did address that. Just other things to think about, is this upgrade? I'm just going to let you read the slide. Once again, I'm not going to talk much about this. If Ed hadn't filled everyone with the information you need to understand what's going on with this by now, I'd be totally amazed. So I won't bore you. But anyway, before we move on here, just the real issues are effectiveness of upstream and downstream fish passage, especially Brunswick. And once again, I think Brunswick is going to prove to be the real, that relicensing will be the seminal event. And that's really what's going to get things started for restoration efforts. NGO engagement is improving. Both the Friends of Merrymeeting Bay, Grow Ella+A work group, and TU chapter, Merrymeeting Bay TU chapter. So, we still need more involvement and support of efforts in the relicensing process. Some of the feeders to the lower river, though, we're going to talk some about those. Sabattis Pond is fed by the Sabattis River, which comes into the lower Androscoggin at Lewiston Falls above Rumbo Dam. And it is one of the sites where river herring from Brunswick are trucked and stocked into. It's a big enough pond that it does have a large production potential, almost 500,000 fish. And what DMR is working on is trying to provide free swim connectivity to Sabattis Pond from the main stem of the Andro. And as you can see, I'm not going to dwell a whole lot on all of these slides. If you look here, we're going up the Sabattis River. And as you'll see, we do have a number of different dams before we do get to Sabattis Pond. Near term, one of the dams has already been removed, and that was back in 2019. We've got some more dams on the schedule to be removed in the next couple years. The person whose name I did want to mention is a guy, Casey Clark, who I guess has been with the Maine Department of Marine Resources for a few years. And just if anyone encounters and interacts with him, he is just aces. He's the best thing that's happened to the DMR in my opinion in a while. He is everything you want to see from civil service. And please, if you ever encounter him, please give him your best. He's certainly doing a great job, especially with this project. But there are some longer term issues. There's more dams to be removed, and one of them's problematic, this Fortier Dam. But still, I think there will be a workaround. If they can't get the dam out, then at least they should be able to get a fishway. So that's what we're looking for. And hopefully by about 2025 or so, we'll have free swim passage from the main stem of the Andro into the Sabattis River. The other resource there in this section of the river is the Little River. And it's kind of interesting. I can remember years ago when I first, I guess even 6 or 7 years ago, I really didn't realize that there was this kind of restoration potential with the Androscoggin. And John Burroughs of the Atlantic Salmon Federation mentioned the Little River to me and Atlantic salmon habitat, spawning habitat. And I was really kind of shocked and amazed. And then the next year, this draft fisheries management plan came out, and I read that and I thought, boy, I feel really, really stupid that all this was happening and I was unaware of it. But the Little River is just a small river that comes off the main stem just below Rumbo Dam on the north bank. And I was able to 2 years ago during the fall go with Jen Knoll, who's one of the marine biologists who works for DMR, and we did some spot survey work to try to find some salmon redds in the Little River. And although we saw some, plausible habitat, we didn't see any redds. But what was interesting is while we were there, we bumped into a local who was in his truck trying to scout some deer there off of one of the roads. And we just kind of, engaged him, and he actually owned frontage further downstream from where we were, where he said he had seen some onids that were, over 2.5 feet long. And I guess there's some vague possibility they were overgrown brown trout, but another likely and more likely explanation is they were salmon that had been passed through the fish lift there at Brunswick and in the fish ladder and continued upstream. So this is something, and hopefully in the future, the DMR will be able to do a comprehensive spawning habitat survey, and there may be some volunteer opportunities there that some of you folks might be able to get involved with in a hands-on kind of way. But definitely would be a good experience. Nothing better than a day in the field with one of the state biologists, fisheries biologists, because they're a wealth of knowledge. It's amazing what all they know. We'll next go on to the Little Androscoggin. Sadly, none of the 7 dams in the main stem have any provisions for fish passage right now. The picture is of the lowest dam there, the Lower Barker's Dam, which is in Auburn, just very close to the confluence of the Little Andro with the main stem Andro. And it's really has to be a restoration effort emphasis. It's kind of ironic for reasons I've never gotten what I thought was a reasonable explanation. It's not designated critical Atlantic salmon habitat, but that's where all the spawning habitat is, and certainly a good percentage of the shad and blueback herring habitat. And the alewife habitat, I'll let you read those, all the different waters that are connected to the Little Androscoggin. Those do have a major potential for alewife spawning. What really gets you about this waterhead is all these dams are just worthless. These dams can all be replaced by solar farms less than 2 acres in size. In one case, Hackett Mills, which is one of the smallest licensed hydro facilities in the state, they could put a solar farm on the existing footprint of the facility and generate as much power in the course of the year. But this combined, 42, 45 kilowatt generation capability is just a drop in the bucket. It's really nothing. There is no way that there is any balance between the good this could possibly do and the environmental damage which the presence of these dams causes. Most of these dams are owned by a company called KEI, and they are they're Kruger Energy, and they are another Canadian company. They're in Maine. They've got about a dozen projects, And all of them are these just small projects that are really worthless and would be they just need to be gone. But as you can see, there's a number of dams on the Little Androscoggin. Besides lower Barkers, we've got upper Barkers, which is in relicensing right now, and that's about a half a mile upstream. There's a breach dam, which shows, we don't have the name doesn't show, but it's the Littlefield Dam, which is breached. You go up to Hackett Mills, which is a small project, Marcal in Mechanics Falls, Welshville, and got a success story I'll be sharing with you about that here shortly. But lower Barkers, over a year ago, it was the relicensing occurred. It's really just going on a year-to-year basis right now. But the water quality certificate called for 1.7 million alewives fish passage capability and drastically increased minimum flows. The owner appealed this to the Maine Board of Environmental Protection, and like I said, and like the slide says, on anything they could think of is what they appealed it on the basis of, and it's pending resolution. But it looks like after over a year of extensions, they finally are ready to announce something. Timing of this briefing was just ended up being a little early, but there should be a settlement announced next month, which will drive what happens in the rest of the Little Androscoggin. It looks pretty certain because only last week on the first FERC docket, the request for a trial type hearing, which is how KEI would fight these prescriptions, that was withdrawn by them last week. So I'd expect by the end of next month, we will know the fate of the fish passage on the Little Androscoggin River. I don't know what that's going to be. If there's some possibility that it's going to also be tied to what happens at Brunswick downstream. So anyway, besides that, the lower Barkers, we've got upper Barkers. That's right now they're doing some studies on for data that will inform the relicensing process. Hackett Mills also in relicensing, waiting on reports there too. Those reports are late. It's going to be interesting because when you get these dry years, some of the studies, your data is going to end up being kind of questionable. So NOAA Fisheries is pinged on the owner, and that Hackett Mills is actually owned by Eagle Creek, who also owns Rumbo, and NOAA Fisheries is pinged on them, but we haven't heard anything back on that. Some other dams, Marcal, it's the next dam above Hackett Mills, and I guess the fish, their current license says fish passage by 2027, but that's conditioned on the fisheries management plan. And so far that fisheries management plan is only a draft. So something's going to have to happen there. Littlefield Dam, that's the one that's already breached, but we do have it, but it needs to go. When you have even a breach dam, which probably will pass fish under many conditions, it still stops sediment flow. Besides water going downstream, you also need to have rocks, sediments, sand, those types of things. And its presence, does damage the watershed. So two very small dams further upstream. Those are, by the time we get to those, it's going to be probably 15 or 20 years, I would guess. But a success story is if anyone is driven by, past Oxford on Route 26 and going north, if you look on your right, you've seen this Welshville Dam. It's really kind of fallen apart. And it does have some effect on water levels of some ponds with a lot of camps on them, which are fed by a feeder from the Little Androscoggin about a half a mile upstream. But the town has now decided, instead of trying to rebuild this dam, that they're going to control the grades at the outlet of the ponds, and that will essentially make this dam just something that probably they will just let wash away. And that's a good thing. But it's key to restoration of alewives and Atlantic salmon. So much of the alewife ponds are upstream of there. And I can remember, I guess, a few years ago going to a meeting of the Royal River Alliance, and we were giving a presentation. And I told people that it was very clear from the historical record that there were once Atlantic salmon, in the Royal River. And I can remember the look on this one woman's face, like, are you nuts? But it's very clear from the historical record, and the same is very true for the Little Androscoggin. I'll let you read this slide, but essentially that there is Atlantic salmon habitat there that's hasn't been used for 150 years, but it does look like the potential is there, and we are working to reconnect that. Besides this habitat up above between West Paris and South Paris, then we also, there's a Bog Brook in Minot, which is a cold water feeder, and there's possibly other cold feeder brooks which go into the Little Androscoggin, but those could provide some additional Atlantic salmon habitat as well. As far as alewife breeding habitat, if you've ever been to the town hall at Oxford, very close to there, you can see where the outlet to Thompson Lake is. And I truly believe that once upon a time there were river herring, there were alewives breeding there. If we can reconnect this, it could produce up to 1 million alewives. Certainly concerns by camp owners in DMR on what would happen to the landlocked salmon fishery. Currently, they eat the smelt that are there. Would they eat the alewives or not? I guess IF&W would need to study that. And all I can say is that for warm water fish, I've had some of the best, summer warm water fishing here locally in 2 lakes where they do put alewives. Those are Sabattis Pond and in what's the other lake? Taylor Pond in Auburn. So I know at least for bass and pike and those fish, they certainly, do thrive with the alewives, but there would be some concern and probably some study required for reconnecting Thompson Lake. So the future of restoration, what's it dependent on? I think one of the things is something that's been a major focus of this group is the upgrade of water quality classification. I certainly hope that that happens in this legislative session. Settlement for Lower Barker's Dam and the entire Little Androscoggin watershed. Something should happen next month. And then what may be tied to this, and really the whole watershed, would be the Brunswick terms and conditions, and we'll see that in February of 2029. So what can you do? Love the Androscoggin. When I was first up here in the early 70s and lived in Topsom, it was a mess. I can remember the pink soap suds at the base of the fall, at the base of the dam in Brunswick in August, in the stink from the polluted water. But we need to, it's not that way anymore, and we need for folks to tell our legislators to support the legislation to upgrade water quality classification of the Lower Andro. There isn't an LD number assigned, or I'd tell you what it was, but it's coming, and please, get behind this with your legislators. Support the Friends of Merry Meeting Bay. They continue to do good work. Support Meeting Bay TU efforts. And once again, hopefully we'll have a volunteer component to a future Little River spawning habitat survey. Support the Auburn Conservation Commission efforts to remove the Littlefield Dam. Boy, they got some hard going with the politics there in Auburn, I'm sure. And the guy who is the Conservation Commission chair is a young man named Sam Boss, who's affiliated with Bates College. If anybody can make it happen, I think Sam can. So if you can support that and talk that up to your friends in Auburn and Lewiston, that would be helpful. Also, you are able to comment on these relicensings directly using a quick comment software function on the FERC site. That's the link to it. If anyone ever wants to comment on any of these processes, you can do it. And I'd be happy to help you do that should the time come. But TU, our mission is, as stated, just would like to kind of introduce Charlie Spies of Merry Meaning Bay TU. He's also a Friends of Merry Meaning Bay member, and that's his email. He is going to be watching what's going on with the relicensing actions for those lower 3 dams. This presentation, went further than he is his coverage area, but he will be involved with the future of the relicensing. Just about done. I would just like to say that we've still got about another month of winter left at least. If you read one more book this winter, please read Running Silver. It's if any of what I've said today resonates with you to any degree and you want to explore it more and understand it better, read this book. John Waldman is fabulous. He does have specific name references to places in Maine. And in fact, I bumped into him fly fishing up in Greenville this past summer. Good guy. It's a good book. Please read it. These other ones are good as well if you've already read that one. But there's some ways to get to the source documents, which most of this presentation was based on. Here's my email. Please, get in touch with me if you'd like to explore any of this further. And that's it. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to questions.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was awesome. So really appreciate that. While Martha's looking at questions, I'll just mention that in terms of Atlantic salmon restoration, the Androscoggin River is part of what the feds call the Merry Meaning Bay shrew, salmon habitat rearing units, and that includes the Androscoggin, the Kennebec, and the Sheepscot. And what's very unfortunate in my mind is that while there's a goal of restoration goal in that area, I think it's like 500 reproducing pairs of salmon. It doesn't really matter where they come from, and all the energy really has been going into the Kennebec. So as someone who wants to see more attention paid to the Andro, as probably most people on this call know, the more diversity within a species we have, the healthier that species will be. And so those fish on the Andro are going to be a little bit different than those on the Kennebec, which will be a good thing. So hopefully, some of the points that you've raised in your presentation will resonate with a lot of people on the call here and serve to motivate a little more enthusiasm for the Andro and restoring it as part of this bigger Merry Meaning Bay watershed. So, thanks, Steve. So yeah, Martha, you looking at questions there?
So there was a question from Kay.
From Kathy Clare about the quote there. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that your slide, Steve, about the quote on the shad inefficiencies at Brunswick, that didn't have an attribution to it. Do you remember which report that was from, or was it from John Lichter or?
No, that's from the study that was done by some folks from UMO, and if it's not. I thought I had attribution there on the slide. I can go back to it if you want me to dig through the slides. But
well, wasn't on the slide, and I know John Lichter and students at Bowdoin had video cameras out there and were counting and so forth, and maybe some more work's been done since then. I don't know, but anyway, question was where was the quote from? So.
Yeah, it was from a published paper by a group of research scientists from UMO.
Okay. That it for questions, Martha?
Yep, that's it for questions. Usually it takes a while for people to soak in and decide on what they want to ask.
Well, it's a lot of information, and maybe too much. It's if that's the case, I apologize, but it's there's just so much there. And the amazing thing is, having said all that, you still feel like you haven't even scratched the surface.
I had a question, Steve. I think, if I recall correctly, there was a FERC project number associated with Bisco Falls, but your slide said FERC exempt. What does that mean?
Well, what FERC exempt means is that this project doesn't have to go through periodic relicensings. Once again, these projects are relicensed on 30 to 50-year cycles. Once a project is designated exempt, and it's smaller projects, I forget what the exact kilowatt capacity is, then they don't have to be periodically relicensed and relooked at. There's what is it? There's only about 20 or so, less than 20 projects in Maine, and they're kind of dropping out because, once again, small projects really aren't profitable, and just the regulatory burden on small projects is just so amazing. A number of people are just getting out of hydro. That's kind of what's happened with let's say the Mousom project was licensed, but it was very small project, and the Kennebunk Light and Power District just got pretty much. They never said this was the reason, but you could tell they just wanted out. It was just too much of a hassle for too few kilowatts, and that's an exempt project, so it doesn't come up for relicensing. It does have terms and conditions of operations attached. Just in my experience, if you take a look at any of these projects that are exempted, probably about half of them, if you really look hard, you'll find that they're really not living up to what they're supposed to be doing. They're so small, and it's only exceptionally, like for, say, the Royal River, where that was an exempt project, where someone decides to take them on and go after the exemption and get them and shut them down. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. That's a good one. Does anybody have any other ones?
Yeah, we've have Brian in the lineup on the stack, and then an Ellen is next. So Brian, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. I am curious as to how stiff is the opposition to removing these dams?
That's a good question, and it tends to vary. I think what you find is if you get a small Maine town with a dam on it, it could be their biggest single source of property tax. So I think if anyone who's following what's happening with the lower Kennebecks, realizing that's part of what some of the objections are to removing those 4 lower dams would be they'd lose the property tax valuations for any dams that are removed, as well as other disadvantages. I think that one of the reasons why it's great to have people like Charlie working and looking at Brunswick is the day will come when it's going to be an issue when Brunswick comes up for relicensing. And what you hope is that things like the Brunswick Conservation Committee and the town of Topsom and these kinds of entities will get behind the removal or the great improvement to Fish Passage for those dams. Brookfield organized is a participant in the Kennebec River Alliance, which is a group that's trying to oppose the removal of the lower Kennebec dams. And what you're afraid of is the same thing would happen on the lower Androscoggin. And if we have people in the towns saying, we're willing to do this for the environment, and not just trying to nickel dime over what they're getting for an assessment. I know one thing that Brookfield does tend to do too is to go to the towns and try to lowball their assessments. And it certainly appears that what they do is they tell their investors this dam is worth one thing, and then they turn around and tell the town it's worth something else. So those are the kinds of things which I think drive opposition. And I don't know, I guess a certain amount Mainers of a certain age associate hydro operations with prosperity and jobs. hydro is renewable, but it's not clean, and it's certainly not green. And you can ask any trout or any of those diadrous fish that we showed on the slides there. So anyway, I guess does that answer your question?
Yes, and I thought it was interesting. You said one of the dams could be replaced with just 2 acres of solar panels. So could that be a way for towns to recoup some of their lost revenue?
Certainly. In
Okay,
fact, just to,
Thank you.
it's interesting there, just on the Mousom, where the dams are still in and they're fighting license surrender down there in Kennebunk, is the town already replaced the generation capability with a solar farm.
great. Okay, Ellen, you're up next, and we have one more question after that before we're done. Then that would be Vance as the last question. Thank you. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, okay. If the Brunswick Dam isn't going to be up for relicensing until 2029, isn't that holding everything else up in a very bad way? And
Well-
the other thing is, you just mentioned that hydro electricity is not clean and not green. Could you amplify a little bit on that?
Sure. Let's see. I guess let's see. What was the first question again?
Well, if the relicensing of the Brunswick Dam isn't going to come up till 2029, isn't that a terrific holdup of everything else?
Well, I guess yes and no. It's you certainly would like to have all this stuff fixed, immediately. But I think really, if you really look at this realistically, the state's getting squeezed for resources. They're up to their elbows trying to deal with the relicensing of the lower Kennebec dams, along with all the other projects besides this that are up for relicensing. And to take on another major project, simultaneously, I think it would be beyond their capability. So, my take on this, and once again, this is my opinion and guess, is that what will happen is when they resolve the lower Kennebec dams issues, then the focus shifts, and you look in the next thing that's up next. One of the major things that's up next will be the Androscoggin, and I think from a resources protection aspects, that's how that will go. And let's see, your second question was, why isn't hydro green
and clean? Yeah, I mean, we've got all this business about CMP and all this hydro electricity coming down from Canada, and you're saying, why isn't it clean electricity? And I mean,
well, I mean, as a TU guy, I guess my primary answer to that is just ask any trout. If the restoration of the removal and restoration of fish passage would be the greatest thing you could do to improve the environment. The dams themselves, they raise water temperatures in the impoundments. They lower oxygen levels in the impoundments. They promote the abundance of non-native invasive species such as bass and pike, those kinds of things. And I guess one of the things people don't realize too is alewives and eels and these things, when they come up from the ocean, they bring nutrients with them. It's not as drastic a process as say Pacific salmon on the West Coast, but still, there's just so much fecundity, so much fertility that's being lost from the lower parts of these watersheds because we don't get the interaction with the saltwater species that were listed on that slide that I showed early in the presentation. So, those are I think some of the prime reasons.
Vance, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question? Go ahead, Vance. We see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Is it something he can type into the text box, into a chat box?
Yeah, so what he's got is, what do you think is the most critical dam removal battle to win that would generate momentum for further efforts?
Wow, that's what's the most? Yeah, that I guess that's a hard one. when dam relicensing occurs, what happens is it's really kind of a two-part process. The FERC process is the visible process, but then there's also the 401 water quality certification process. And just so often FERC, and once again, speaking as a Steve Heinz opinion, anything with commission on the end of it tends to be supportive of the industry it's supposed to regulate. And FERC, in my experience, is too often and too lopsidedly sided with hydro interests, and not rather than trying to balance hydro interests with environmental and other aesthetic and other kinds of concerns. So often when these licenses, when there are terms and conditions applied to licenses that do have good consequences, they come out of the Maine Department of Environmental Protection because the projects aren't meeting the water quality certification requirements. That having been said, Edwards Dam, as I understand it, and I guess if Greg Pott's still on the call, he can correct me because I think he knows this better than I do. But as I understand it, the exception would be Edwards Dam when FERC actually refused to relicense the project because it was just so devoid of value. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yes, mic isn't working. So we'll go on to one last question. He did answer in the chat that it answers this question. We have Jim as maybe the final question. Jim, are you in queue?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm new to this. Ed, one of those new people on the show today. But can you take a minute and just explain what design? I've looked at that fish ladder in Brunswick. What design for a fish ladder would work, would be effective, and how high can it go? I looked at the kayaker under Baxter Falls. That would require a great deal of structure, the way the Brunswick Dam was built. So what would you suggest they do?
That's to be, that's beyond my expertise. There are a few people I can direct you to. In New England, one of whom is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee who are experts in fishway design. It's very complicated. The science involved is nonlinear, which means that you make a small difference could have a great effect on what the final result is going to be. What you're looking for is an alternative to these fish passages, to these constructed fishways or nature-like passages where you have series of rock ramp kinds of structures that more resemble a natural fish passage. But as far as how to design that, it's very complex engineering, and once too often. Once that engineering has been affected and the fish passage is installed, it doesn't work. And,
even when it's in, I would simply come and support the woman who spoke and said, if you don't fix the Brunswick one, you're not going to get getting a chance upstream to play with the other ones. So it's a big problem. Thank you for presenting this. This is a story that I was unfamiliar with.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Okay.
We
So
are
that's it.
finished with our questions. Ed, do you have a few last words?
Yeah, well, thanks again, Steve. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Martha. I'll point out to Ellen, who asked a question about clean and green. If you haven't seen it, you might want to go back on the website and look at our first presentation from this season on mega dams and mega problems. And Steve is talking about smaller dams tonight generally, where the problems are typically fish oriented, but they're huge climate change issues associated with the really large dams that are the type that Hydro-Quebec uses, and marine fisheries issues with those as well. And Jim, I'd be happy to talk to you about fish passages design. It is quite a complicated issue, and there's a number of ways to do it. I'll also point out that Brunswick originally, part of the issue with Brunswick is that the design of the dam was changed after the fishway design was approved, and or the turbine placement was changed. And so one of the big problems is that the entrance